Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Reneika Lightbourne with Advanta IRA. Today, we're going to discuss education savings account. We know the landscape for educational costs here in the U.S. has changed dramatically over the past 20 to 30 years. We're not just talking about tuition. We're looking at the total cost of education, which includes books, room and board, and other related expenses. According to recent data, the average in-state student attending a public institution spends a little over $26,000 a year for to go to college, whereas the average private or nonprofit student could spend upwards of $55,000. And unfortunately, the cost of education, like everything else, is likely to increase. The escalation in costs has led to an increased amount of student loan debt, we know, which is critical in terms of a financial issue many American families are facing. Speaking of federal, student loan debts, it's as of June 2023 of this year, federal and private student loan debt is roughly about $1.7 trillion. So again, today's webinar, we're going to look at how utilizing an ESA can be an effective financial planning strategy for you to help with your child educational costs. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in the question box. We'll answer as we go, and also we can certainly allocate some time at the end to answer any additional questions as well. Again, my name is Reneika Lightbourne. I'm one of the business development specialists here at Advanta. I've been with Advanta as an employee since 2019, but I'm also an Advanta client prior to joining. So self-direction is something that I actively do. I, obviously advocated strongly. So again, if you have questions or you want to, do a consultation, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. You can also visit advantaira.com as well. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. At Advanta, just know that we don't give you any tax, legal, or investment advice. All of the information that I'm going to present today is just educational purposes. As always, we encourage you to do your due diligence. You want to consult with your professional team, whether it's your attorney, your CPA, or financial advisor, before making any investment decisions. Okay, so just quick takeaway points. Self-directed ESAs, they're governed by the same IRS rules, but just three quick, takeaway if this is a new concept for you in general. Just know that you can pay for qualified educational expenses tax-free. Obviously, with self-direction, you're in control, so you choose the investment for the account instead of relying on third parties to do so. Investing in alternative assets includes, real estate, private equities, private lending, and so much more. And then, of course, the opportunity to capture faster growth potential than the traditional stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So just a little history about Advanta and who we are. We've been in business for 20 plus years now as the leading self-directed IRA administrator in the business. While we don't give any tax, legal, or investment advice, our team is comprised of attorneys and also certified IRA service professionals. Our headquarters is in Largo, Florida, which is the general Tampa Bay area. Advanta has an office in Atlanta, which is where I'm based, but we do work with clients nationwide as we now custody about a little over $2.6 billion under our management, or more so our administration. If clients have accounts with us, it is FDIC insured. Also, too, at Advanta, our focus is providing you that concierge-style service. So every client would have a dedicated account manager who's with them for the life of their account with us. So if you have questions or you need clarity in terms of making an investment or a transaction, then you have someone to help you guide you through that paperwork. And then, of course, our educational content, where we have obviously in-house webinars like today. We're going to be talking about ESAs. And then, of course, we do feature experts and guest speakers to talk about different subjects. This webinar is recorded. It's going to be on our YouTube channel within 24 to 48 hours. Also, too, you can check it out on our video library on advantaira.com. I would encourage you to also check out our events page. We do have our upcoming events featured there, to whether it includes a guest speaker or our Pitch, Promote, Prosper platform. It's pretty much a virtual networking event. And then, of course, our blog, which features the latest and greatest, anything related to the news and trends and self-direction. And then my colleague, Alex Perney, hosts our podcast. So I definitely encourage you to check out our many resources. Okay, so moving right along, let's take an overview of education savings account. It's also known as a Coverdell savings account. While ESAs aren't retirement accounts, it is an excellent tax-sheltered account that allows you to save for your child's education. It can be a custodial account very similar to that of a Roth IRA, except the funds must be used exclusively for paying for qualified educational expenses for the beneficiary. Unlike regular savings account, ESA offers significant tax advantages, and they share similarities to the 529 college savings plan, and I'll touch on that in 1 or 2 slides. But ESAs are unique in their flexibility and use. They can be used, again, for a wide range of educational expenses, not just college tuition, but you can also use ESAs to pay for primary and secondary educational costs. It's a very popular alternative to 529 plans. Okay, if we take a look at the history of ESA in terms of how it got started, it was created by the Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997, but actually went into effect January 1st of 1998. So in addition to obviously it being used to establish for qualified educational expenses, the ESA rules are modeled after IRS rules. So if you're familiar with IRAs and how they operate, it's very similar for an ESA. The tax benefits is tax-free. The tax benefit includes tax-free growth on the investment, the withdrawals, again, being tax-free as long as it's used for qualified educational expenses. Before I get more into ESAs and how they operate, I do want to touch on, exactly what is a 529 plan. So a 529 savings plan often is known as a qualified tuition program. It's a state-sponsored savings plan that offers, a variety of tax advantages. There are really 2 basic types of 529 plans. You do have to check with your state to see which type of 529 plan they offer. And then, of course, again, it operates like a Roth IRA where you get to invest after-tax contributions in the likes of mutual funds and other investment vehicles like stocks and bonds. The only thing is with 529 plans, though, you are limited to the investment options available in your state. So that's a conversation, again, to have with your local state of residence. When it comes to paying for your child's education, you can withdraw money. You just need to let the direct the program administrator to distribute the required funds to you or to the beneficiary of the 529 plan. And then, of course, with 529 plans, the flexibility is you can change the beneficiary at any time. This means that if your child decides not to attend college, you can certainly shift that beneficiary to the likes of a sibling. 529 plans are properly managed by experienced investment managers, and they do have more so of a generous contribution limit compared to ESAs. When we look at contribution limits for 529 plan, they can be as low as 100K or up to as high as 350,000, again, depending on the sponsoring state's regulations. There's really no income limit rules for a person making contributions to a 529 plan. With the 529 plan, though, the parent of the beneficiary does retain control of the account even after the beneficiary turns 18. Okay, so also with the 529 plan, it does allow you to pay up to $10,000 a year in tuition costs only for K-12 through K-12 education, whether it's a private, public, or public school. I do want to reference that with a 529 plan, you can transfer an ESA into a 529 plan, but you cannot transfer a 529 plan into an ESA. That's one of the few caveats. However, you will be able to roll over unused 529 funds into a Roth IRA. Starting in 2024, Secure 2.0 enacted allows families to now roll over up to $35,000 of unused 529 funds into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. But I will reference again, please make sure that you're aware of some of the restrictions as it relates to moving that 529 unused funds into a Roth IRA. And obviously, we're still going to wait for further guidance or interpretation from the IRS. When considering ESAs, it's important to just more so, understand how they compare to 529 plans. They're both popular educational savings tools. They both offer tax-free growth and withdrawals for qualified educational expenses, but there are some key differences. 529 plan typically has higher contribution limits, may offer additional state tax benefits, depending on your state of residence. However, ESAs offer more flexibility in terms of educational expenses for elementary and secondary, and we'll take a look at that on a later slide. And then, of course, the investment choices. So understanding the difference in how 529 and ESA works is crucial in determining which vehicle is best suited for your family's educational goals. Okay, so let's take a look at who are the major players when it comes to an ESA and actually who controls the ESA. So first and foremost, we do have the trustee or custodian. This is the entity that actually holds the asset, whether it's a bank or other entity that's approved by the IRS, like Advanta IRA. And then you have the grantor or the contributor. The grantor, the depositor, or contributor, used interchangeably, is the person who actually establishes the ESA with the approved financial organization. Again, that's where a company like Advanta IRA comes in for the benefit of that designated beneficiary. And usually the contributor grantor is usually the first person that contributes. Next up, we have the designated beneficiary. The designated beneficiary is the individual on whose behalf the ESA is established for. The grantor or depositor identifies the designated beneficiary on the actual plan agreement or on our application during opening up the account. An ESA may be established with contributions for a designated beneficiary as long as they're not 18. So before they turn 18 years old, you can open up an ESA for a designated beneficiary. And then another major player, or the last major player I'll touch on, is responsible individuals. So an ESA must have a responsible individual who is in charge of the investments and also the distribution decisions. The responsible individual can be a parent or a legal guardian, and even the child themselves once they reach age 18. As the responsible individual, you get to make the investment decisions, but do know that the ESA payouts are always paid to the beneficiary and cannot be returned to you. Yes, so this is recorded. It's going to be on our YouTube channel within 24 to 48 hours. Continuing with responsible individuals, the grantor or depositor, they get to name who the responsible individual is on the plan agreement at the time the ESA is open. The responsible individual generally, again, typically the parent or guardian. There's only one responsible individual that may be named on the plan agreement at any given time. Also, with our application at Advanta, you do have the ability to list beneficiaries, so a death beneficiary, whether it's one or more primary or contingent death beneficiary may be named in case, if the original designated beneficiary was to transition, so that you do get to list the beneficiary there. Okay, so next up we have eligible family members. So grantors, depositors, they can elect to allow the responsible individual to change the designated beneficiary for qualified members of the designated beneficiary. I know that's a mouthful, but just bear with me. As long as that designated beneficiary is under the age of 30, the qualified family members includes the designated beneficiary's spouse, their child, grandchild, sibling, parent, nieces or nephews, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and any spouses of those individuals. A designated beneficiary first cousin is also considered a qualified member, but the cousin of his or her spouse is not. So next we're going to take a look at contributing to an ESA. So managing ESA contributions, effective management of an ESA is key when it comes to maximizing its benefits. When you're contributing to an ESA, it's important to keep track of the actual annual limits, understand your income levels, and how it might affect your ability to contribute to an ESA. For an ESA, you can contribute, the contribution limit is $2,000 per year per child for 2023. That's going to remain the same for 2024 as well. The savings, the contribution must be made in cash, so a cash deposit. And then, of course, for contributions to an ESA, it must be made by April 15 to count towards the prior year. So, for example, you have to make that $2,000 contribution by April 15 of 2024 for it to count for 2023. contributions can be made, again, until the child reaches 18. Once they turn 18, you can no longer make annual cash contributions. There are exceptions, though, for special need individuals. And for contributions to an ESA, it's discretionary and it's not required annually. So obviously with self-direction, if you're contributing to an ESA and you invest and then you grow that investment from the initial 2,000 to say 5,000 or 10,000, again, you don't have to contribute every year if you don't want to. So, you know, while that 2,000 per year may seem like it's limited, because self-direction, you have the ability for tax-free growth and also the ability to utilize alternative assets. You can't, using that as a preferred strategy can't be understated. So the question is, if converted to a 529, does the ownership change back to the parent? How does the ownership work in that scenario? So I would definitely tell you to confer, check with your state. But with 529 plans, obviously the parent retains control even after the child turns 18. But I would tell you to check with your state to see what their local guidelines or regulations are pertaining to it. Advanta, we only custody ESAs, obviously 529 being state plans. Thank you for that question. Oh, another thing I want to reference with contributions, obviously, you can make contributions to an ESA, you know, including the child themselves, as long as the contribution, the contributor's modified adjusted gross income does not exceed the IRS threshold. And then for regarding eligibility, again, contributions can come from parents, grandparents, friends, other relatives, as long as they're within that IRS limits. For a single individual, single taxpayer, the phase-out ranges between 95,000 and 110. For a married couple filing jointly, the range is 190,000 to 220. So if you're married filing jointly and you make 190,000 or less, you can contribute the full 2,000. Okay, so let's pivot and take a look at some investment options. Investment options in self-directed accounts, again, are quite broad because you have everything at your fingertips in terms of what you can invest in. There's just a few restrictions, and I'll touch on that. Whether it includes real estate, tax liens, notes and mortgages, private lending, it really allows you to diversify your investment strategy and also mitigate risk by not putting all of your eggs in one basket. We'll take a look at a couple case studies as well, how you can use smaller accounts like an ESA to invest. But before we do, let's take a look at ESA qualified educational expenses. These funds can be used for various educational expenses for elementary, secondary, and post-secondary schooling. Specifically for elementary and secondary schools, educational expense or qualified educational expense includes tuition, fees, books, supplies, equipment, tutoring, room and board, and other expenses such as uniforms, computers, internet, special needs services, and transportation. You can do extended day programs. So it's just more so, again, anything that's related to that you can account for as an educational, a qualified educational cost. For post-secondary education, meaning, college, whether it's, vocational school, as long as it's eligible to participate in a federal student aid program, you can use it to invest in, you can use it to pay expenses such as tuition, fees, books, supplies, and equipment. Room and board are considered a qualified expense under certain circumstances. So that may be, an area where you have, more questions. We can certainly talk about that, or, go directly to the IRS website, and I'll share that shortly. For ESA distributions, while contributions to an ESA is not tax deductible, the investment growth itself is tax-free, and so are the withdrawals provided. It meets the criteria of being a qualified educational expense that we just mentioned. If the funds are used for non-qualified expenses, then could be subject to income tax and possibly an additional 10% penalty. The IRS does require that all distributions be taken within 30 days after the beneficiary turns 30. Most times this does provide adequate time for most individuals to complete their education outside of, let's just say, someone's pursuing an advanced degree, like going to medical school. But generally, that's adequate time for you to completely utilize the account. One of the flexible features of an ESA is the ability, again, to change beneficiary to another family member, which can be more so a strategic advantage if you have, multiple kids or, multiple children in your family that can make use of those funds. If the funds is not transferred to another family member and it's not distributed by age 30, then again, you're subject to a taxable event where it can be an additional 10% penalty. So do consult with your tax advisor or tax professional when it comes to that. A common question that I typically get is, hey, what happens to unused ESA funds? Yes, if your child decides not to further the education and you've built up a considerable amount of money in that ESA and there's no other child that you can pass it on to or transfer it over to, even if they still have that your child, a designated beneficiary, has to take a distribution by the age 30, you've still built up a pretty nice nest egg for them to give them a leg up in terms of starting their young adult life. So there's still advantages there. For qualified expenses, distributions, ESAs, and in general, I would redirect you to the IRS publication 970. You can go to irs.gov to find it, and then they have a section, I think, starting on page 38, really gets into the nuts and bolts of ESA's account, and then followed by 529 plans. So question is, how does accreditation work for alternative investing given that the ownership is with the child? So if the child is a minor and you're the person that's the guardian or parent that's opening up the account and you're accredited and you pretty much have control, or the responsible individual, you have control over the investment decision, and you're accredited and you want to invest in something that's that's accredited, you certainly can do that. Once the child turns 18 and they take over the account and they're not accredited, then that's a different story. But if they're a minor and you're accredited and you're the responsible individual that's controlling the investment decisions, and you're accredited and there's an offering that you want to invest in, you can certainly do that. So, sticking with the IRS rules, again, with self-direction, you have pretty much a near limitless amount of opportunities that you can invest in. However, when it comes to self-direction, the same rules apply to ESAs as well in terms of the few things you cannot invest in. So that includes life insurance and collectibles. Collectibles being anything like antique art, wine, stamps, anything of that nature. Outside of that, again, you have a blank canvas. That's pretty straightforward in terms of the few investments you cannot make. The other restriction, and this is typically where we get most of our questions, is who the IRA, or in this case, the ESA, is not allowed to transact with. When I'm talking about disqualified persons, I'm pertaining specifically to the investments, not in terms of portability, in terms of who the IRA, who the ESA can be transferred to. I'm talking about specific investments. So, for example, the IRS doesn't allow IRAs or ESAs to invest with disqualified person, that being the account owner, spouse, lineal ascendants and descendants. So, for example, if mom and dad owns, property 123 Main Street or a vacant lot, they can't sell it to their child's ESA. The IRA or the ESA in this case cannot be on the opposite sides of the table in terms of investment transaction from a disqualified person. Or you can't take money from the ESA and lend it to mom and dad. So the question is, what if you're an accredited grandparent and not the guardian of the child, given the child's the owner? So if the child's the owner, meaning they're 18 or older and they have ownership over it, and they're the responsible individual at this point, and they're not accredited, then that doesn't apply to them, meaning they can't invest in an accredited offering if that's what's required. Again, if you're the responsible individual for the ESA and you're accredited, then you can proceed to make that type of investment. Again, just to kind of reiterate before we look at the case studies, with unique investments or ESA investments, again, this allows you to essentially be in control and also diversify, whether it's oil and gas, precious metals, private equity. It's quite flexible in terms of being able to garner higher returns than typical stocks and bonds. Obviously, with any investment, it's always, you do have to do your due diligence, make sure that you're comfortable, make sure that you understand the risk associated with your investment. Diversifying is a powerful strategy and also allows you to mitigate risk. Okay, so we're going to take a look at two case studies. So the first one we're going to look at is purchasing undeveloped land in an ESA. So in this case, we have Susan. She's going to open up an ESA for her child. She's going to make an annual contribution of $2,000 per year into that ESA with the intent of purchasing a plot of land, undeveloped land, vacant lot for $1,200. So Susan goes through the process of filling out the Advanta IRA application, or in this case, the ESA application. It's her responsibility as the responsible individual to go out and find the investment, find the property. She's identified that, and then she's going to put in an offer in the name of the actual ESA, the designated beneficiary's ESA, and then of course she'll work with her Advanta account manager to complete the purchase authorization, just so Advanta has the consent to then move the money from the ESA over to the closing agent or closing attorney. Ultimately, before any money moves, though, Susan, as the responsible individual, as the guardian for this account, or in this case, the parent, she's going to read and approve everything. Once that's completed, Advanta will work with her preferred closing agent or closing attorney, sign all of the documents on behalf of the ESA, and then wire the $1,200 out to purchase that vacant lot. Obviously, Advanta, again, as the custodian, as the administrator, is going to custody and hold the deed or any documents related to that transaction, and then receive the income and pays any related expenses. So after the closing of that transaction, all of the expenses such as insurance or taxes are paid by the ESA. Advanta processes the checks out of the ESA to pay for those related expenses that may come up. In this case, she contributed, she started with a $2,000 contribution. She paid $1,200 for the property, so she left in $800 to account to pay for those related expenses and possibly any educational expenses, qualified educational expenses for her child. And then, of course, the purchase document itself, it's going to reflect that the ESA is actually the owner on record for the warranty deed. So it'll be reflected in the child's name, meaning Advanta IRA FBO Annie Smith minor 12345, whatever the account number is. So some use cases that Susan can implement for this undeveloped lot that's owned by the ESA. She can elect to grow timber. She can rent it out to a farmer. She can, use it for storage units, mobile home park. It can be a plot of land that's, has natural resources like oil and gas wells that she can have the income that's generating from that land flow back into the ESA. Okay, so the second case study we're going to look at is assignments or wholesaling. That's typically known more so for real estate related investors. But in this case, we have Olivia. She's going to do a contract assignment. She's part of a local RIA group, and she opened up an ESA for her son, Cohen, last year, but she decides she wants to be able to invest in real estate. The ESA is currently invested in mutual funds, but she feels that she can realize better returns by assigning it, doing assignment of contracts for that ESA. So in this case, Olivia, she's going to enter into contract with Mark to buy his home for $50,000. We know, again, this is just a hypothetical, but the ESA is going to put down $1,000 as the down payment or escrow deposit. Olivia then, she's part of a RIA group, so she's built up her network, and she finds a buyer for Mark's house. In this case, it's going to be Sam. Sam is willing to pay $65,000 for that property. So in this case, the ESA is going to assign the contract over to Sam for a $15,000 fee. And in the end, the result is, the ESA now has $15,000 that it can use to continue to invest in other alternative assets, obviously pay for her son Cohen's qualified educational expenses. Mark is happy because he got the $50,000 that he was asking for his house. And then of course, Sam is happy as the investment property, as he was able to purchase the investment property for $65,000. I do want to reference that with wholesaling or assignment of contract, just make sure that you're aware of your local state rules as it relates to wholesaling in terms of the amount of wholesaling that you do each year. The IRS could possibly look at it as, operating a business inside of the ESA account. And in that case, it would be subject to what's called UBIT tax. Some other type of investment options, if you have, lesser or smaller accounts like ESAs or HSAs, I tell clients, it doesn't matter if you're starting with $100 or $1 million. Every dollar you can actually find something out there and put it to work. But in addition to purchasing vacant lots or doing assignment of contract, you can do private lending. You can invest in tax liens and tax deeds. You can do partial notes and mortgages. So you definitely do have some options to partner smaller accounts like ESAs. Okay. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that came in. Again, I'm going to, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the question box. We'll definitely get those answered. This is going to be a more so shorter. I think it's 12:33 right now. So I'm going to, wrap up in a few minutes, but I just want to reference again, check out our events page for our, upcoming events. Check out our YouTube channel for this recording, other recordings related to self-direction as a whole, or ESAs or HSAs or any other type of accounts that you want to self-direct. When you're ready to get started, the process is pretty straightforward with us. Step one, first and foremost, being, filling out the application. We can guide you through that. We do pair you up with an assigned account manager that works with you when it's time to make your investment, helping you dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of the paperwork itself. And then, of course, step two is funding your account. If it's going to be an annual cash contribution or you're transferring from an existing ESA account. And then finally, step three is, what is it that you have an interest in terms of us investing in? Is it, doing a tax lien? Is it investing in, vacant lot? One of my clients, he's a sophisticated and savvy investor in every sense, but he did a strategy in one of his kids' ESA with a judicial tax lien. Obviously, that took, some time. You really have to be skilled and knowledgeable in what you do. But he essentially, I think, used $100 or $1,000 from his kids' ESA and was able to purchase a plot of land, vacant land in Johns Creek. If you're familiar with Georgia, Johns Creek is a pretty desirable area, and then turn around and he was able to ultimately sell that piece of property for thousands of dollars. So just with one transaction, you're able to, again, pay for your kids' education, but also you have enough capital built up to now you can go out and do, more investments or larger deals. Again, before I close it out, just to recap some of the benefits of an ESA: tax-deferred earnings, tax-free distribution as long as the account is being used for qualified educational expenses. You have the ability to obviously self-direct, invest in something that you know, something that you understand. And then, of course, you can be able to, port it over to other family members, or, if your child doesn't use it by 30, they do have to take it out, and they're subject to a tax penalty. But again, it could still be a healthy nest egg for them to get started. Let's see if there's any more questions that came in. Okay, if there's some more questions, go ahead and, let's see. Another one came in. No, statement. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. If there's no more questions, I do want to say, thank you all for taking the time to join me on today's webinar. If you're searching for an option to help finance your child's education and you think that ESAs would be a good option for you, Advanta IRA, we're definitely here to help you. Again, you can reach out to me directly via call or email, or go to advantaira.com. And with that, I will tell you and wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.